South Africa stands firm amid U.S. aid freeze over land reform. The diplomatic showdown between South Africa and the United States has escalated further, with President Cyril Ramaphosa doubling down on his country's commitment to land reform, despite economic threats from Washington. Following former President Donald Trump's executive order to freeze aid over South Africa's land redistribution policy, the South African government has remained resolute, rejecting U.S. interference. "We will not be bullied into abandoning justice," Ramaphosa declared, emphasizing that the land reform initiative is about correcting historical injustices and promoting economic fairness for Black South Africans. But now, the situation has taken a new turn. Trump's latest ultimatum demands that South Africa withdraw its genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, ICJ, or risk permanently losing U.S. funding. The bold threats raise questions about U.S. foreign policy priorities and the real motivations behind Trump's interest in South Africa. With global power dynamics shifting, the U.S. risks losing its influence in Africa as China, Russia, and BRICS nations step in with alternative economic partnerships. The big question now: can South Africa thrive without U.S. support? And will the aid freeze backfire on Washington? The land reform debate, a fight for economic justice. At the heart of the conflict is South Africa's land reform policy, which aims to correct centuries of racial inequality by redistributing farmland from white landowners to Black South Africans. Latest statistics highlight the urgency of land reform. White South Africans, who make up just 7% of the population, still own 72% of private farmland. Only 11% of land has been redistributed since apartheid ended in 1994, falling short of government targets. The goal is to redistribute 30% of commercial farmland by 2030, prioritizing Black farmers and rural communities. However, Trump's narrative that white farmers are being persecuted and having their land stolen is widely disputed by analysts, historians, and South African officials. Key facts about the land reform law: it targets underutilized land, abandoned properties, and state-owned land for redistribution, not productive farms. All land transfers go through an independent court process, ensuring legal oversight. Compensation is only excluded in cases where land was acquired through apartheid-era policies that forcibly displaced Black South Africans. Despite fear-mongering comparisons to Zimbabwe's land seizures, experts insist that South Africa's approach is structured, legal, and focused on economic sustainability. However, the U.S. aid freeze has added pressure, with some foreign investors threatening to pull out, further complicating the situation. Why did the U.S. freeze aid? South Africa's response. Trump's executive order to cut aid to South Africa was initially framed as a defense of private property rights. However, recent developments reveal a broader agenda. Washington is now demanding that South Africa withdraw its genocide case against Israel. How does the U.S. aid freeze affect South Africa? The U.S. provides $500 million annually in health, education, and economic development aid to South Africa. While significant, this amount only represents 0.1% of South Africa's GDP, $400 billion. South Africa has strong trade ties with China, Russia, and the European Union, which could offset any economic losses. South Africa belongs to South Africans, not foreign interests, Ramaphosa reiterated this week. He further emphasized, "We will not be coerced into abandoning our legal challenge at the ICJ." Trump's threats have sparked backlash from human rights organizations, who argue that U.S. foreign aid should not be weaponized to suppress legal accountability. Meanwhile, South Africa is actively seeking alternative economic partners, reducing its reliance on U.S. funding. The bigger picture: is the U.S. losing Africa? Trump's aggressive stance on South Africa is part of a broader Western struggle to maintain influence in Africa. As countries like China, Russia, and BRICS nations expand their economic and political footprint. Major developments this week: China pledged a $3 billion investment in South Africa's agricultural sector, strengthening economic cooperation. Russia announced new energy trade deals with South Africa, further reducing U.S. leverage. BRICS nations have accelerated talks on a new trade and currency system, reducing dependence on Western financial institutions. The U.S. risks isolating itself in Africa by using aid as a political weapon, while African nations increasingly seek economic independence. Will South Africa become a model for other African countries resisting Western intervention? What happens next? Can South Africa thrive without U.S. aid? South Africa is already moving toward greater economic independence, but several factors will determine its success. 1. Expanding BRICS cooperation. Stronger economic partnerships with Brazil, Russia, India, and China could replace lost U.S. aid and investment. 2. Ensuring agricultural stability. A smooth land redistribution process will be crucial to prevent food shortages and maintain investor confidence. 3. Navigating political pressures. The U.S. may escalate economic measures, including sanctions, making diplomatic and trade diversification crucial. With the genocide case against Israel moving forward, Trump's threats could deepen the diplomatic rift between the U.S. and South Africa. The stakes are high, not just for South Africa but for the entire African continent, as countries rethink their reliance on Western aid. A defining moment for South Africa's sovereignty. South Africa's resilience in the face of U.S. economic pressure is shaping up to be one of the most significant geopolitical events of the decade. The land reform issue has evolved into a global case study on economic sovereignty, racial justice, and Africa's shifting alliances. If South Africa successfully navigates this crisis, it could reshape how African nations handle Western intervention, setting a new precedent for land rights and economic justice across the continent. What do you think? Is the U.S. justified in freezing aid, or is South Africa right to push back against external interference? Let's discuss in the comments. Stay updated by subscribing to my YouTube channel for expert analysis and following me on TikTok for quick updates.